You mentioned the rite of passages before, and I'm curious for you personally, what were the most important rite of passages that you've been through? And also, what are some rite of passages or a rite of passage you recommend other young men or other young people to go through in their life?
Intimacy is the hardest one for me. Yeah, particularly, with a woman. That's like, bro. That's like, I think that for me is the highest ante of all the different things. Like, you can do hard things. You sit in a cold plunge for longer than is healthy and become hypothermic, or you could do any of the other stuff that I mentioned, or you could eat, a bunch of grams of mushrooms or something in a dark room and, see dragons and fucking feel like you're going to die or whatever. But that's all very temporary and very like, it's like jumping off of a tall waterfall. You just be like, okay, like screw it. Just close your eyes, just jump in. But I think the persistence of a relationship, to me, I think that's like, for a man, is one of the most high leverage evocations you could endure. I would say it would, like, evocations in the sense it evokes, for me at least, and probably a lot of other men, it evokes you to want to get your life together. It evokes you, especially if the woman's like, what are we doing here? Are we going to have kids? Are you going to get me a wedding ring? Are you going to actually let go of the idea of you're going to bang every random hot chick that like passes through your Tinder profile or whatever, and we're just kind of like, this is cool for now, bro. Like, that's, it really, like, it does a squeeze of sorts to, I think, the consciousness of a guy. And so that's something that I found to be probably like the biggest, I don't know, just effector, I would say, of like my heart, and also my lifestyle. So that's, I would say like, be willing to be vulnerable. Be willing to quote unquote open your heart, which sound, especially if I was talking to myself and I was like 22, I'd be like, I don't really know what you're talking about. And you're some new age freaking weirdo. Like, what are you, like, open my heart? That doesn't, give me some science. And then you go to like Heart Math Institute, and you can actually measure the magnetic frequencies that are coming from the heart. I think it projects out like 12 feet or so. From the brain, I think it's like 3 or 4 feet. So you can actually measure, there's quantitative measurements of what's happening around the heart and the organs and the brain and all that stuff. So, and it changes based off of your present state. So the idea of like feeling like open-hearted, or feeling like protected or closed or contracted or closed down, any of that, there's literally quantitative objective measurements from an electromagnetic perspective of what that looks like. So there is that as well. But again, it's one of those things that I think it has to be like an actual embodied experience, and you have to get your heart broken, and you have to just get smashed and like pulled through rocks and feel hopeless and helpless and insane. Like that's I was at one point in love with a girl from Nepal. I don't remember what the word for in love with, but essentially it means like, it's like, I'm insane for you. Like, it's like not good. It's like, love is like, it changes everything. So I would say that would probably be the greatest rite of passage for me, and like the most powerful, is a girl for me. Cause I'm, I identify as heterosexual. But that I'd say is the gnarliest of all of the hard things a guy could do, would actually be open himself up to a woman. And particularly open himself up to a woman and start getting into the point of being with the possibility of having a child, and being with the possibility of like, you're the quote unquote one. Like, I'm going to actually push all my chips into you and not be 98% here with you, but I have my foot kind of out here on the ready. Like that, to close that up and say, like, let's make life together. That's,
Do you think that's
probably
harder
like the
today?
gnarliest.
Do you think that's harder today?
Oh, for
versus
sure.
any other time in human history because
Yeah.
of you literally can open an Instagram app and see someone or see something that is possibly attainable, whereas our grandfathers did not have to deal with that because they were going to the store. That doesn't make it right, wrong anyway, but it's almost more difficult for a man to be fully in today versus any other time in human history, which is just a
Yeah.
fascinating concept.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the having the like Chris was it Chris Rock? He has like a joke about a man's only as faithful as his options. And so when you're in like a, which, whatever, I mean, infidelity is very high in relationships. I just did a podcast with a girl called Wednesday Martin, who she wrote a book called Untrue. It's all about how women actually engage in infidelity like much more than is proposed typically, particularly in long-term relationships, particularly if the partners live together. And there's, a lot of the statistics or ideas or concepts around like men just have this rapacious desire to spread their genetics, and women just want to be like safe and, make a baby and stay home. Wednesday's like, no, like that's not it. So yeah, people, I think that the story of what people think relationships are and think relationship is and all of that oftentimes is not actually consistent with at least like the statistical truth of what's going on with relationships. And there's a lot of dishonesty with ourselves, dishonesty with our partners, fear of like losing love. So you just won't communicate the way that you feel. You just keep it kind of bottled up, and eventually it's the same thing as the samskara stuff. You keep it bottled up and you don't feel safe to be able to communicate, and actually, in a non-judgmental way, be able to communicate the way that you feel. And you just say, cool, I'm just going to stuff that down. I think typically, it's going to lead to it starting to fester and stew, and, it comes up in like quote unquote toxic ways, and then ends up, probably ruining your relationship or, whatever it may be. So being vulnerable and open, about even parts of yourself that you might feel like uncomfortable to communicate with, or maybe like ashamed to communicate with someone that you feel, really vulnerable with, and it's like you really value their opinion. That's hard stuff, man. But if you do it, it's also very healing, I think.
You've said before, it's hard to emote. I don't understand love. I don't understand relationships. I don't understand going to family reunions and people seeming like they love each other and feeling home and feeling safe. How does that quote resonate with you today versus, I don't know when you said that, but
that was from when I was a kid. And when I grew up, I was like very, I think probably a lot of people feel this way, but I felt like very different in a way. I felt like everyone kind of like knew, like they belonged. And, you go to family reunion thing or whatever, whatever the thing is. And it seemed like everybody was kind of like, they got it. Like they love each other. They feel like they're happy. They're very emotive and they're hugging and like all this stuff. And it's like, wow, they're talking to each other. And I was just very, like I had this uncle that was kind of a dick, I think, but he called me Mumbles. Because I didn't talk much. I just kind of would like look around and I just kind of like, what do I do with my hands? And like, who are these people?
And it's fascinating because now your job, in some respect, is to podcast, which is the opposite of mumbling. Like you're a very clear, eloquent speaker. So it's interesting
nice.
how that happens.
I don't think that's always the case, but yeah, I mean, but that's what you do typically. I also train people from like for movement and physicality and all that stuff. But I might come from a background of feeling, tons of injuries and imbalances, and had my shoulders have both dislocated probably 50 times. I've dislocated my ankle, had like chronic back pain for years and years and years, had all sorts of issues. And so then it's like, okay, let's like make this my vocation, teaching people about this stuff. If you see a psychologist, they're probably psychologists because they're kind of nuts, and they just, or like a coach, relationship coach on the internet, a relationship counselor. They're probably that because it's been so devastatingly challenging for them. And now they just know everything about the topic because they come from, their own problems with it.